All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our July 18th, 2022 regular meeting of council. We did already open the meeting a little after 6, and we've just come out of executive session discussing the hiring of a public official, and we will be announcing that later in the meeting. But for now, let's go ahead and do any announcements. Josue?
Thank you. Before we get started, I would like to ask council or inform council if that's okay. I've got Marianne joining us via Zoom because we are now in an hourly contract. I would like to give Marianne the night off since I reviewed the legislation and I think we're good on all the legislation pieces that we would need her input on. So I don't think that we would need her tonight, and if that's okay with you, I'd like to give her the night off. Okay. Thank you, Marianne.
All right. Thanks, Marianne. Okay. Josue, any other announcements?
Oh, yes. We had a major power outage this weekend. Yesterday, we had a transmission line break. So if you're wondering why the entire village was out of power, that's because the one transmission line running from Snipe substation to our switch station went down. There's a branch that fell on it. There was a fire, and it broke the transmission line. But we were out of power. So we were out of power from 12:50 to about, what we went on, 2:39 or 2:40. They were back online. So a two-hour major power outage. But I'm glad that it was only 2 hours, given that it was our entire transmission line. So we want to give you guys an update on that.
And this is something we don't have control over,
That's
right?
correct. And that's one of the reasons I bring it up, is that this is something that we have no control over. This is the one transmission line that comes into the village. I think what's important to highlight too here is that over the last 2 years that I've been on board and we've been looking at building a more resilient grid, we've been talking about building a switch station on the south side of town so that we could be fed from a southern circuit, so that if we do have a transmission line go down such as this, we have another way of getting power to the village. So I think what you experienced yesterday is what communities are afraid of happening throughout the country, where you're losing transmission lines due to the ever-changing climate change that is going on. So if you hadn't thought about the real possibility that our transmission line could go down, it did yesterday. And so it highlights the importance of planning and thinking about our infrastructure and building out these resiliencies in our grid so that we don't experience these power outages for longer than necessary. So.
Okay. All right.
I have a few more.
Yeah, please go.
In your packet, and I primarily bring this up now in this part of the agenda or the meeting, because I want the public to know how much of a great team, how great our pools team is. In the packet, there are pictures of 5 individuals that had saves in our pool. They jumped into the water to save either a kid, or in one case, there was an adult from drowning. So I think we have an outstanding team at the pool, and I just couldn't ask for a greater group of young people that are running the pool. It's a real job. You can see it. It's real as it gets. They're saving people's lives. So there are pictures on the packet. So I encourage our viewer, residents, citizens to check out those images, and those are young people we should be proud of.
Sweet. Any other announcements? I'll just mention a few. So first of all, there is no first meeting in August. So again, this is something that I think it's always nice to recognize a former councilperson, Lori Askland, who understood that it would be nice to give our council clerk a time to take vacation, and maybe others as well. So we will not have a meeting on August 1st, and we'll be back on August 15th. And I also wanted to mention that, what do I have here? Oh, we can talk about that later. Just wanted to highlight I guess a bigger thank you to our Bryan Center youth, and we are sending them a card for the barbecue aprons that they made us. And in fact, I'll just mention Judy has called them gaprons, which I thought was great for Pride. And those were really nice and brought a lot of joy to all the council members. And so thanks again for that wonderful gift. And I think with that, we can move into
Brian, did you want to move in the review of?
I was just about to say that, yeah. So we're going to review the agenda first, to switch that before the consent agenda, because I wanted to recommend that we put 2 resolutions on the consent agenda. These are both related to grants that we're proposing to go after to handle our water meters, as well as fixing some of our streets. And so any objection to that? Okay, the other thing, of course, is that until the next meeting, we need to move the manager's report up to after special reports. Starting in August, that will be permanent because we will pass the time for the ordinance. Okay, anything else related to the agenda? Excellent. Then let's look at the consent agenda. And first of all, we've got the minutes from July 5th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Second are the minutes of July 6th, 2022, which was our special session. And again, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have Resolution 2022-48, and Judy, we can read that in by title only.
Yes, this is authorizing the village manager to prepare and submit an
Maybe I missed something. Didn't we just move those 2 resolutions into the consent agenda?
Right, but remember we learned that we still have to go through each consent agenda item?
I
We
know.
can't,
Oh, are we doing that now?
yeah,
Oh, okay, sorry.
yeah.
authorizing the village manager to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission state capital improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs, and to execute contracts as required for water meter replacement project.
All right, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right, Josue, do you want to talk about this briefly?
The first one is, this is water meter replacement. We've gone after this funding for a while. They're not a top priority for the state, but we keep going after it and hope that, you know, we're going to get funded. What this would allow us to do is replace all 2,000 water meters in the village, of which 1,000 of those meters are located inside the home. They're in a crawl space or in a basement or in someone's closet, and it makes it very difficult for our team to access just for basic things as read, and more importantly, when there are leaks or issues with the meters. So modernizing our meter reading system will have huge dividends, pay huge dividends for us. One, it improved the operations of our utility by having faster, more accurate reads. It provides added value activity for customers. These meters would have leak detection. And as we modernize the entire system, we envision a utility where customers could access their usage on their phone via an app or a website where they can see their usage in real time. So this is part of our modernization strategy. I've got my candles lit, and I hope we get this funding. Finally, in terms of money, we do have money for the matching fund. It will come out of the 610 Water Fund for this project. And the match is a 16% match. That gives us enough point where we think we are competitive in the application pool, but not so much cash where, you know, we're spending a lot of money.
So basically, we already have this in the capital fund. So other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And then we've got resolution 2022-49. Judy, we can do that by title only as well.
All right, this is authorizing the village manager to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission state capital improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs, and to execute contracts as required for roadway maintenance.
Okay, any brief comment, Josue?
Sure, this is the part of the same pool of money. We spend about $70,000 on road resurfacing a year. That's what we're planning to spend this year and next year. What we're asking for here is authorization to pursue funding from the state for local roadway transportation projects. We anticipate if we are awarded, we would increase our expenditure for up to $114,000, which is 16% of the project funding that we're asking for. But what this money would allow us to do is complete more road resurfacing in one time. So this is money that we're already planning to spend anyway. We would just be looking to leverage it to get additional money to do road resurfacing. So the project is also structured to have a 16% match. That money is already available in our 208 fund, which is our motor vehicle permissible tax fund.
Okay, seems like a smart move to me. Questions or comments? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yeah, pass.
Oh.
Yeah, we didn't.
Did I not? Okay,
Well,
can I get a motion?
I move that we would have talked about that.
Okay, and we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Petitions and communications, Kevin.
All right, thank you. Clerk has received the following letters. Bette, Kelley, and Wayne Gulden wrote a letter regarding noise in the downtown district. Greene County Community Health District shared an update regarding COVID transmission rate. Dirk, Lackovich-Van Gorp submitted a letter regarding restructuring of the finance department. The mayor's clerk has submitted 3 sets of monthly reports. Lazar and others have submitted a letter regarding the response to the Roe decision from the medical community. Laura Curliss submitted a letter regarding the police survey. The Board of Elections has the public notice regarding the upcoming August primary. Catherine Price submitted a letter regarding our financial department and concerns. Marianne MacQueen has a letter from PCFO Cohort report, and Kevin Stokes submitted a letter in response to citizen complaints. And that is the extent of petitions and communications that the clerk has received for this public meeting.
All right, thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Josue?
There are several things that in those correspondence that relate to operations. Does council have any questions about the concerns that have been raised? By the constituents? Is there anything that you have questions on that you want me to follow up on?
The noise concern.
Okay.
And I guess the whole, the restructuring of the financial department, is that, how viable is that proposal?
How viable it is? Well, it depends on which argument you think it's a problem. If there's one of those letters makes reference that the finance director is the check and balances, I'll refer to the charter. The village charter places the financial responsibility for finances of the village on the village manager. There isn't a reference to a finance director. So from a governance perspective, citizens voted a charter that places responsibility on the village manager for management of the finances. The body that controls the purse of the government, it's council. We have a very robust process to approving the budget that is set for the village manager to manage throughout the year. So I think there are some inaccuracies in how the information is presented in that process. This was also brought up at the last meeting by another constituency, that the difference between statutory cities, statutory villages, charter municipalities. This is the way that our community voted to run its government and run its finances. We are a council manager form of government, and this is the design. Council sets the budget, the manager adheres to the budget. A strong mayor form of government puts that authority on the mayor, or at times puts it in a publicly elected finance director position, which is one of the structure was suggested. But in terms of how our community voted a charter, we are following things by the letter of the law, and I don't know if there's any other particular concerns other than the overarching structure.
And I think a good example of the robust processes, which we're making even more robust, is what we just did in the consent agenda. You know, we've agreed that every time we go after a grant, council's going to approve if there's a match. So,
And I certified that we have those funds in those, the money is available in those funds to make that match contribution and how it aligns to existing work. So the resurfacing, we can agree that we do that on a regular basis, right? That's just part of the core business.
I also liked Bette and Wayne's suggestion that we tie that into any discussion we have around the busking proposals that the Public Arts and Culture Commission brought. So, so let's make sure that we make a note of that.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Yeah.
Well, sorry, the letter about the row response, so Josue, I know you were looking into it, so if you don't want to talk about it now, that's fine. I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk about it now.
Wait.
I think the letter was in reference to whether the village could pursue and how encouraging the village to pursue making abortion access something that was available to employees. And so I wondered if you had, I know there was something you were looking into.
Yes, it's something that we were looking into, and we are going through, this is not unique to us, but other cities like Cincinnati took strong positions that they're going to offer transportation expenses or cover or funding for those services. We're looking we'll be looking at the legal issues of using taxpayer money for aborted services. We are looking at a strategy where it's not specifically linked to a particular service, because if we start designating particular funds for a particular use, we have to have a way of verifying that, and that takes us into a territory that, as big government a believer I am, I do not believe in violating anyone's privacy in that way, that we have to ask what specifically medical service they'll be doing and show them proof of that. So we need to look away at methods and procedures where we're not violating anyone's privacy when it comes to healthcare. And that's just an overarching goal of mine when we look at healthcare issues. So we'll be looking at the legality of the taxpayer spend, but probably we'll be looking at what is a better way of delivering or funding healthcare services for our employees, regardless of what the issue is. So we'll be taking a bit of a different route on that, and we'll be evaluating what our programs offer, our healthcare programs offer, and does it meet the needs of our current employees, and what health issues may come up in the future. I think that is the best approach versus looking at it, how are we dealing with aborted services?
All right, so let's move into legislation, and we've got the first reading of Ordinance 2022-29. Judy, we can do that by title only.
This is approving a use policy for municipal broadband known as SpringsNet for the Village of Yellow Springs.
Can I get a motion?
Second.
Okay, so this is the first of two readings, and so I think what's most relevant here is to give a brief overview of what we're looking at, and then of course we'll have the public meeting at our second reading. So Josue, do you want to?
Sure. Yes, I want to stress that this is the direct result of previous conversations we've had at council around two specific topics. One is surveillance technology and surveillance ordinances that we already have on the books, and two, as we expand municipal broadband services, how does it fit existing requirements that the council has set, particularly around surveillance technology. So this policy here, I think is going to be a standard throughout the country on how well a municipality can put use policies around municipal services and privacy protection, while also considering net neutrality. Now, in this work, I'm not the leader in this. Ellis Jacob may designate me as the leader on this, but I think he's been the person, the forerunner on crafting language, along with the technical expertise of Timothy, who are both online. So I will pass the baton to these guys, and they'll make me look good on how well they put this together. Alice, you should be able to unmute now. And Tim, where are you, Tim? There you are.
There you go. Hi. Hi, everybody. Good evening. And thanks for this opportunity.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I work closely with Tim to try to assemble this little package you have in front of you. Can you hear me okay?
Okay.
You're not hearing me?
Select speaker. Problem there.
I can hear you, Ellis.
Can you hear us?
I don't think they can, Tim.
I can hear you now.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. And thanks for the opportunity to speak very briefly, I promise you, about this. By adopting this particular ordinance, the village would be adopting among the strongest privacy and net neutrality protections in the country for a municipally operated broadband network. It comes to you as an ordinance because we have Chapter 607 that says anytime the village gets involved in any kind of technology that could be used as surveillance technology, it has to go through this particular process that provides for a public hearing and all those sort of protections. As we know that elsewhere in the country in the past, municipal commercially operated broadband networks have been used to provide the government information without the government getting proper search warrants, and they're routinely used to share information with third parties and sell the information to others. And so by adopting these particular policies through this process, you're guaranteeing people that sign up for SpringsNet, number one, that really strong policies will be in place, and number two, that they won't be changed unless they come back through this public process and everybody knows what the proposed changes are. So I think the policies are terrific. Our goal was to balance this idea that if you're operating something like this, you have to collect a certain amount of information to operate the network. And so what we've tried to do is guarantee we can collect that type of information and that amount of information and leave it at that. It will not be shared and only accessible through other proper legal means. And so in figuring out where you draw that line, what's in the policy, what's out of the policy, Tim has been essential because he understands all of these networks. And he can certainly, far better than I, answer any of the technical questions about why something's in or out.
Tim, did you want to add anything?
Well, I would add that the privacy policy and accepted use policies are pretty standard operating procedures for any ISP in the country. You have to have such policies in place to protect both the users and the ISP itself from abusive situations, illegal operations, spam, unauthorized access, hacking, that kind of stuff. If you don't state it, I think you'd be in legal trouble. So, yeah, I mean, I put together a lot of the verbiage that Ellis has worked with. And I don't know if there's any technical questions about the specifics. I mean, I assume all of you have taken a gander at this. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I want to thank Tim Ellis and the SpringsNet team for all the continued work. This is getting really exciting. And actually, somebody mentioned to me, Josue, that maybe we should have a town hall about the municipal broadband to make sure people know what's going on and what the opportunity is, and it's going to be cool. Questions or comments from council?
Thank you, Tim and Ellis and Brian, for your comments. Yeah, I think the importance of a town hall would go a long way to ensure that citizens are completely familiar with the offerings that the village's municipal broadband service would offer. I think it's imperative that once we get to go live, if you will, that as many folks that are interested have become as informed as they can. And so I think a public forum to share that information, give folks opportunities to ask on an individual basis, what this is going to mean to me, with the current streaming services or the things that I like to watch on television at home. And we want folks to have that sense of comfort, that you will be able to maintain the services that you currently have at a much higher speed, at a much lower rate in terms of the cost, and the proceeds would be going through a village utility, just like we're paying now for electric and water. So again, just getting folks informed, and those of us who've been working on this project, I am sure that we think it's so great that it's like, no way no one would avoid signing up for this. But I think we want to err on the side of caution and ensure that everyone is aware. I think this I don't mind admitting that as an IT professional, this is the first responsible use policy I've read with this much level of detail. And so this is definitely a strong policy, folks. Privacy issues are definitely well protected. You have absolutely nothing to worry about, but if there are concerns, whenever and however this public forum does take shape, definitely want to invite everyone out to come out, get your questions answered, and eventually sign up for SpringsNet. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then Judy, let's go ahead and take a vote on this one, even though we've got another reading.
Absolutely. MacQueen.
Yes.
DeVore Leonard.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Outage.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Next. All right, thanks again. We next have the resolution 2022, is that 45? And we can do that by title only.
This is authorizing the village manager to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Agraria for climate action and sustainability planning services.
Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
Okay. Marianne, why don't you take it away?
Sure, and I know that Alex is here and has a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, yeah, we're getting that pulled up.
Sure, so we had a report from Piper Fernway that we received at the end of January. That report was dense with a lot of accompanying documents in which she made recommendations on how to move forward for the village in terms of climate action planning. And since February, a group of us that included me from council, Rebecca Potter from EC, Marilyn Moyer from the township, Alex and Megan from Agraria. Bethany came in as representing the Glen and Tecumseh Land Trust. Did I miss anyone? Zach. Michelle and Zach. Yeah.
A lot of people.
So we have been meeting semi-regularly since then to develop a format to come back to council for this presentation, and you have documents in your packet as well. So let's turn it over to Alex.
All right, Alex.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Alex Klug. I'm here. Judy, can we pull that slide up? So here representing the CASP steering committee, I'm assuming everyone's had some time to review most of those documents. I put together more slides, so I won't be quite as quick as Ellis Jacobs was, but if we want to go to the next slide. So we're here today to present the phase 2 proposal to you all. So in a nutshell, really what we're looking at is looking at climate action sustainability planning. It's really important for any municipality, any community to start engaging in this kind of work. Yellow Springs has already been doing this for many decades, in fact. So there's a lot of disparate plans that have been put together. They were kind of isolated actions, and what we're proposing to do is take the collective impact model and put them all together into a comprehensive plan that everybody in the village can take advantage of. So that's a quick statement on what the proposal aims to do. And then that collective impact model really has 5 key criteria. It's making sure all of those stakeholders, so all of the larger institutions, environmental organizations, the schools, community members, everyone is sort of following that common agenda. There's also shared measurement systems, mutually reinforcing activities, which don't mean we're doing the same projects or programs. It just means we're kind of bolstering each other up and scaffolding ourselves up for success. and then continuous communication and a backbone of those sort of primary support organizations. Next slide. Okay, so a lot of text on this one. I'm not going to go through all of it, but a couple key pieces on this one is really looking at what did that pilot year look like. So Marianne kind of went over that very quickly. Last year, council did approve $25,000 for a 6-month CASP coordinator. That person really pulled all of those disparate, isolated plans together and put them into like a big comprehensive document with recommendations for next steps. They also did a couple tangible projects, but really it was sort of laying that foundational framework for this year. And the key takeaways was really getting those stakeholders engaged, getting all the community members involved. So they developed the Sustainability Champions program. And then they identified those 6 domains you can see on the right. So all of the specific project priorities will fall within one of those domains, being energy and buildings, food, habitat, transportation, waste, and water. Next slide. Okay, and then these are some of those successes. So again, most of that 6-month time, which was a really, condensed amount of time to kind of dig into this really important work, they were still able to kind of launch some of these community projects. So up in that upper right corner is Florentina Rodriguez. If anybody has gone to the farmer's market, you've probably seen Florentina there. She both supports Agraria's SNAP food system stand, so that's the food stamp stand essentially. And then she's also started the Yellow Spring Seed Library. So it's a really awesome and important project to kind of get heritage seeds, make sure that we can save and preserve seeds here in the community. On the bottom right corner is one of the 6th grade students who launched the compost PBL. So they wanted to look at reducing waste in the school district. That started just as 2 young women who really love to compost, and it's now a PBL project in the 6th grade class, and we're looking at expanding that district-wide as soon as we can. And then that center photo is some of the sustainability champions from last year. And then I think it's also really important to note that outside of even the hyper-local immediate community, we do have a lot of support from folks at CSU and UD supporting a lot of this work and sending some interns over to continue the research part of it. Next slide. Okay, so this is where we're at today. So that top piece really goes over, as Marianne said, what we've been doing these past 6 months. So on the right-hand side, you can see a list of all the people who are on the steering committee. Each of those agencies has agreed to commit 1 person to representing these projects for as long as we can continue moving in this direction. As you all remember, you were surveyed recently. Those survey results were generally positive. And then we're here today with the packet of information you've all received to request that $25,000 for the phase 2 coordinator. Right now, we're looking at launching that from about October to March, which will be another 6-month time period. We're giving ourselves a little extra cushion to make sure that we have all those reports and readouts done and some implementation done by July, so we can come back to you all in 6 months and kind of give you an update on where we're at. We will be doing monthly reporting to EC, which I hope will get communicated back to everyone here. I think that'll happen. So then that second part of this slide is really looking at, assuming you all fund this amazing work, what are our next steps going to be? So Agraria and the steering committee are going to work to put that actual position description together, get that posted, look at hiring the person, and then we'll start work. And again, we'll make sure in those 6 months that we will give out monthly reporting. And then if you go to the next slide, Judy, I'm not going to read through this one, but I'll leave it up while folks can ask some questions. These are some of the project priorities that we've sort of outlined in the steering committee. This is also some of what you all said you'd be most interested in seeing get done this year. So this is still kind of a draft proposal of what we might end up doing, but we'd love to hear from you all and possibly from some of the wider community members around what they want to do. One of those things I really plan for us completing is continuing the Sustainability Champions project. I think a big part of this work is making sure that each person in the community feels engaged and that they can participate at whatever level they can to see important environmental action happen. So I do want to see that continue. And if we have really fun, doable projects come our way, we'll make sure to get those done. So any questions?
Thank you, Val.
Yeah.
Questions? Gavin.
So are any of the other stakeholders contributing? Is there a full budget? I'm wondering about the township. I know the other entities are probably more like groups that get funded than fund, but just wondering if we're the only ones or if there's other funding.
Yeah, currently to my knowledge, and I can defer to some other folks here, I don't believe believe we've reached out to any other of the stakeholders for funding. Now, Agraria is agreeing, so that's why I'm here today speaking to, is Agraria is agreeing to be the fiscal sponsor for this, to funnel that money through. We've got the capacity both in staff and in the physical location space of the offices to actually house somebody there. We can provide direct supervision daily, so we can make sure that that person's staying on track. As far as funding goes, that previous CASP report did have a list of funding opportunities, and we've all been kind of doing our own homework into grants that we might apply for, but currently we don't have any lined up.
I've got a question, thank you. And thank you, Alex, for sharing. And I noticed in what you got highlighted under administration, funding, and outreach, that part of the task is to identify sources of funding for phase 3.
Yes.
Are you anticipating being mostly or nearly, or to what degree self-sustainable at that point?
Yes, that's the goal. Okay. So I didn't want to put in there a certain, we will absolutely have this funded, because we can never guarantee those things. The goal is certainly, and I think one of the things Marianne and the rest of the steering committee we've all discussed is that's, for me, I think one of the most important pieces to jump right into. Anybody here who's written grants, which I assume is most of you, knows that, you can write your grant and it might take a year to get released. So I think that that's something that we need to get kind of jumping on into the first month immediately. Past that point, we can look at other private opportunities. The EPA does have a lot of climate action, community adaptation toolkits and resources we can pull into. But again, I wanted to make sure before we start creating those grants, look at funding, we have everybody's buy-in first. So, and it's pretty important, I think, that the village government supports this on some level. So.
Right, good. And I'm not sure if it was this or something else I read. It may have been, I think, the resolution that talks about, as we're entering the budget planning process, that this is a good time to start thinking about future funding. But that I did notice that, and I did make note that I think it is good to consider the fact that we are in the midst of, or beginning, the budget planning process. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. All right, thank you.
Okay, anything else?
I have a few things.
Yes.
The MOU will still need legal review, so we would work on that. Also, I haven't been involved in this iteration of it, and I would need to make sure that it conforms to what we need to make sure it includes, and that I have we talk through it.
Okay. Yeah, and I think my understanding with the resolution, as I read it, is that if we approve it, is the next step, is to work with our village manager on that. Yes, so thanks for highlighting that. Anything else?
I would just say that I was one of the early champions of this work. There were a lot of things that if you recall, one of my welcoming letters was one from the Ohio EPA that we were exceeding our sanitary flows. And that, a lot of it had to do with just stormwater getting into our system. So looking at climate action, it's all these things that Alex have talked about, but it also includes things that might not be included here that we've done a lot of work on. Reducing sanitary flows, water that's getting to our wastewater treatment, reducing huge water losses that we were leaking through a water system. So all of those things, while they're not as sexy and appealing as these things that Alex talked about, they are as important to addressing climate action issues.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks, Alex. All right, and so Marianne, anything else you want to highlight before we look at the resolution?
Sort of jumping off of what Josue was talking about, and recalling at our last council meeting, we had people from Power Clean Future Ohio come to talk. So I see at this point there may be two tracks as we're trying to get our hands and minds and hearts around this work. And the Power Clean Future Ohio work is more, I think, directly relates to the village government functions. And Josue and I got together a few weeks ago to look at some of the possible goals that the village might do that Power Clean Future Ohio had suggested. And as Josue noted, some of those things we have already done, in particularly around energy and renewable energy resources. So I'm seeing that there would be a strand that the village government can be doing using power PCFO primarily. And that would be more probably about energy, transportation, buildings perhaps, water. But at this point, it's sort of two strands, some located within the village government, some will be located within agraria and communication, of course, between. But being involved in the cohort with PCFO, I think will help us look at how the village government itself can be making some concrete goals.
And if I may add to that, as you're speaking, more things are coming to mind. We have an agenda item later today that specifically ties into what Alex presented on the water piece. We have stormwater issues through town, and part of those stormwater issues were due to policy decisions that were made in the 70s of no growth framework. And part of that no growth policy change also led to no investments in infrastructure. Well, they also probably didn't anticipate climate change. So they were our residents were thoughtful about creating the green belt as both an environmental way of addressing access to green spaces, but they didn't anticipate the stormwater issues, and no investment happened in stormwater, where we reached that point that we need to invest in stormwater mitigation. So there's two sides to that coin. Alex talked about establishing these bioretention swells and other features. On the government side, the other side of that coin is we need drainage systems that can accommodate the stormwater.
Yeah, I did want to say, kind of related to the Power Clean Future Ohio, the cohort, interestingly enough, it involves Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Yellow Springs. So I think that tells you something about our village values and commitment to that. But it's a great group. Okay, so I think we're ready to vote. Kevin, something else?
What are we actually voting on?
So the resolution is to commit the $25,000 for the work and to direct our village manager to.
Should we have Judy read it
an MOU.
in full?
Sure.
Whereas Council for the Village of Yellow Springs acknowledges climate change and the loss of habitat and biodiversity as existential threats to life on the planet, and whereas Council understands that it has a leadership obligation to continue to create strategies to mitigate climate change, lower greenhouse gas emissions, and increase native habitat in line with our village value, to seek in all decisions and actions to reduce the community's carbon footprint, encourage sound ecological practices, and provide careful, creative, and cooperative stewardship of land resources. And whereas Council is committed to continuing to pursue sustainable practices in village operations, building on a tradition of initiatives and policies that includes an energy portfolio that is approaching 100% renewable power sources. And whereas Council recognizes that climate change and sustainability work requires a community effort and wishes to collaborate with Tecumseh Land Trust, Glen Helen Association, Agraria, and other partners in these efforts, now therefore be it resolved by Council for the Village of Yellow Springs that, Section 1, the village manager is hereby authorized to enter into an MOU with Agraria for 2022-23 climate action and sustainability planning efforts as shown or in a form substantially similar to those outlined in Attachment A, MOU, and in Attachment B, Work Plan. Section 2, funds in the amount of $25,000 will be provided to Agraria to support climate action and sustainability planning and programming efforts through July 31st, 2023.
Okay, and so we've already gotten a motion. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, and the reason I asked what we were actually voting for was, just looking at the title to the resolution, it's the MOU. Mm-hmm. But then buried in there is the money.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure that we did have a conversation about the source of funding. If that's settled, I'm okay. Just want to make sure that we don't have any issues.
Okay.
If you need me to certify the funds are available, they were set aside as part of the 2022 budget process.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Marianne? Okay, Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Did we have a motion?
Yeah, we, before the presentation, we had a motion. So I got it that time.
That's probably what threw us off.
All right, Brown,
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
MacQueen,
Yes.
DeVore Leonard,
Yes.
Couch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Our last piece of legislation is Resolution 2022-47. Again, title only, please.
This is authorizing the village manager to negotiate a contract for legal services.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Right. Okay, I will lead this off. So I think we've kind of highlighted that our last special session was about interviewing 3 law firms and attorneys for the village solicitor position. We typically do a 2-year contract, and our current village solicitor had just wrapped up 2 years. And so we had a lot of discussion around what the needs for the village are. We had staff highlight who use a lot of our legal services, in particular our council clerk with records requests, our planning and zoning administrator for the various property and economic development projects, certainly our village manager, and also our police chief. And so we took that input in, we looked at a lot of other factors, and I don't know, council members, anything? Well, I should mention who we interviewed. So that was Brianne Parcels, who is our current village solicitor. And then the other 2, I'll say, law firms were Frost Brown Todd and Brickler Eckler. And so, and both of those law firms we've worked with in the past. So other council members want to highlight anything related to what you were focused on or are focused on?
Wait, so we named Brickler Eckler,
Frost Brown Todd,
Marianne.
and then Brianne.
What about?
So Frost Brown Todd is Amy, and
Gotcha.
Brickler Eckler is Joelle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no other comments.
Okay. Marianne?
I think that we looked at the various considerations that are important to us, and Josue, thank you for sharing the types of concerns that staff has and how that can change over time. And it's pretty broad too. We looked at the various ways of how we would pay, whether it would be by the hour or retainer, what each firm had to offer. So I think we had some in-depth discussions about our needs, what is offered financially, what we would be looking at, and we did that in 2 executive sessions. So I think it was very helpful, the discussions.
I mean, maybe I'll add 2 particular takeaways for me. One was the reality that the legal world has become a lot more complicated and more difficult to navigate. And so we've definitely, I think, are factoring that into our decision. I certainly am. And a second piece is that because of, kind of related to the first, because of this complication, we have had to get legal advice from various sources, which is why we've worked with several law firms. And there was a suggestion which resonated with me that having a one-stop shop could be really valuable. A firm that has the resources to understand the various issues that we get into. So anything else before we, I guess, make an announcement and take a vote?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I just feel like this idea of like the things we get into, we should just say that part of that is because we haven't engaged citizenry, because we haven't engaged council. It's really interesting talking to the solicitor candidates. They all basically said, you do way more than villages and, you know, entities of your size. And I think that's something we should be proud of. And also that the village should recognize has costs. That, like, because we hear so many different kinds of proposals, because we consider so many different kinds of ideas, we have to talk to attorneys a lot more often, and it costs us money. So because we've had some, I don't know, communication issues, there's been questions about things we've been working on, executive sessions, I think it's worth helping folks understand that we're trying to do right by the village in terms of costs, but also ensure that we're getting good advice so that we can do some of the kinds of things that we want to be able to do here in the village, but that frankly, a lot of other people don't do.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I think another, I would just add on to that, is also protecting the village and making sure that we have those financial resources to do some of the things we talked about today. But as you can imagine, I mean, just with the net neutrality and surveillance issues, those are complicated. So, okay, so Carmen?
Yeah, I mean, so during, you know, kind of the interview process, it was important for me, at least from my standpoint, that we were going to hire a solicitor that didn't use, that didn't use the charter as simply an advisory document. It was really important for me that that solicitor would be interested, like would follow that document as not just a guideline, but, you know, how we run the village. And that was important. And through the interview process, I think that I was able to discern who would do what we wanted them to do, because that's part of being an attorney, and who would find a balance between, you know, what we wanted to do, what we were trying to do as a village governing body, and what would be basically that someone who could kind of be a little more neutral than just yes or no. There's two pieces there. The charter is more than just an advisory document, and someone who had a little bit of neutrality.
Yeah, and you know, the way we heard that from some of the interviewees was that the law is gray. And so, you know, navigating that takes some thoughtfulness. Okay, well, I think what we need is a motion to recommend one of the candidates, and then we will vote on that. So
I'll make the motion. I'll need a little help though. So are we signing up a firm or the person or both?
So for Frost Brown Todd, it is Amy Blankenship.
Yes, so
For
make a motion that we contract with Frost Brown Todd and Amy Blankenship.
Okay, is there a second?
As the lead.
Oh, sorry.
As the lead solicitor for it.
Right.
I second.
Okay. And Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
On the motion? Okay.
Yes.
That's Brown,
Yes.
MacQueen,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
DeVore Leonard,
Yes.
Tausch.
Yes. And then I think we also need to vote on the resolution, which then directs Josue to form that contract. So I think we can do this as an all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Well, I think it was a great process, and thanks for all the time that people invested. Okay. We are now moving into citizen concerns. This is the time on the agenda where we'll take comments on anything that's not an agenda item. We were reminded recently by our clerk that citizen concerns is also the time for council to listen and not necessarily respond and have a broad conversation. And based on the last 2 meetings that went quite long for a variety of reasons, we're going to try to tighten up our process. So with regard to that, if it's something really simple, we might answer it on the spot. More likely, it would go into the manager's report or maybe become an agenda item or something along those lines. So we're all going to do our best, even though we love to answer questions, to hold ourselves back. And again, as I said in the last meeting, citizens always have access to their council members and should approach us anytime they have questions. So,
And
yes.
I wanted to say something sooner about the clipboard.
Yes, because I saw John Hempfling used it.
Right, yeah, so, well, I'll say it. There's a clipboard, and it's right there at the end of the dais, and it's, thank you, Vanna. That if you are here and you did come prepared to speak on a citizen concern, it's helpful for all involved if you sign the clipboard to advise us of such, and it helps keep the process moving.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So Judy will keep time on up to 3 minutes, and we ask that you state your name and your affiliation with the village. And so John, since I know that you signed up, you can come on up. Oh, look at that. All right. Well, so do we have any citizen concerns?
John, you got 3 minutes to do whatever you want to.
Okay. Well, if not, then we'll move into our special report. And we're very happy to have Angie and Len here. And some exciting stuff that I think are going to be, have some great implications. So Angie Sue.
Hi, good evening, council members. My name is Angie Shu. For those of you I haven't met, I moved to the village in 2018. In 2019, I joined the board of the Yellow Springs Community Foundation. In order to tell you about the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Fund, I'm going to walk you through really how we've gotten to this point in the last 2.5, 3 years. So when I joined the Community Foundation, there was already conversation about how do we best serve our community. We are doing that so well in so many ways, but there are individuals that we felt like we were not reaching. So the conversation was already, how do we reach those people? And then 2020 was the year where everything changed. So with COVID, and then a few months later, the Black Lives Matter movement, this brought to light the massive inequalities in our society, in our village, in our country, and really around the world. So with COVID, we saw right away that there were basic needs of members of our community that were not being met, and the gaps in services that our invested organizations and individuals were rapidly moving to meet. At the same time, with the Black Lives Matter movement, we saw the history of racism being talked about in a new way, really, what I want to say is, activists coming together and reclaiming the conversation and reclaiming the direction of change and the long-term effects on things such as generational wealth. So what happened at the foundation is that simultaneously there were 2 very interesting processes happening. One was looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, looking at those issues through our own process and saying, how can we grow as an institution and how do we do our work better to account for that? And then at the same time, the Community Foundation was taking on a lot of work of the COVID response, which resulted in taking $80,000, getting that to families in need, to individuals in need. The DEI process with the Community Foundation resulted in the concrete action of developing a DEI fund. We didn't really know what we were going to do with it yet. The foundation had gone through a process, but we knew that it was important to establish a fund for whatever action we would decide to take. So both of those things really took us in the direction of we need to serve individuals in our community better. In fall 2021, we had a generous donation by a private donor to the Community Foundation. These individuals said, we want to serve the individuals, a subsection of the community who are not being currently served. So that combined very well. And they were very excited about the idea of contributing that fund to the DEI fund or building that up. The foundation also matched the amount of that private donation, and we're also in the midst of building a community campaign to bolster it even more. So now we have this DEI fund, and there are a lot of ideas of what to do with it. So we convened a community brainstorm. We very intentionally selected individuals from different subsections. We really wanted broad representation of the people who live here. And through that community brainstorm came the idea of a universal basic income, also known as guaranteed income demonstration program. So then we're in 2022, we spend 6 months doing our crash course in UBI, Universal Basic Income. So we're trying to learn as much about this as we can, and we're also looking at our community specifically. How would this apply to Yellow Springs? How would we do it here? So the DEI fund that I mentioned previously, we said, okay, now we have an opportunity. Let's take everything we've learned and let's start to implement. Let's utilize this money and let's get it back out to the community as effectively as we can. So in that 6 months of research, we also brought together an incredible group of local advisors, committee members, and also nationally known experts. Amy Castro, who really is a national expert, turns out her cousin lives in Yellow Springs. So there are a lot of people that are geared up to support us and walk us through this process. So Len Kramer was brought on as a Miller Fellow in addition to myself. And what we have here for you today is the proposal of how the DEI fund will be implemented. It's in 2 parts. The first part is an emergency fund, and the second part is the UBI pilot, which we've named YS Equity. So Len is going to speak to you about the emergency fund section, and then I'll come back and tell you some more about YS Equity.
So as you probably know, there are a number of emergency funds already available in town. And we met with the people who run those funds to determine whether there are gaps or people not served by those funds, and also to find out how they work, because we don't want to create any new wheels when we don't have to. What we found was that the most pressing need today is working with Florence Randolph on the small but persistent unhoused population that is in Yellow Springs. And we're now here in the summer, and it's a little bigger than it is in the winter, but that population persists throughout the year. So we're going to focus in on 3 things with Florence. We're working to produce a Yellow Springs-based resource card that lists resources for people who don't know where to go to get things like clothing or housing assistance or any of that kind of information that can be handed out to people, and they will have access through that card. The next is to make sure we are connected to the housing groups in Greene County, the Greene County Housing Coalition and the Continuum of Care Planning Group for Clark and Greene counties. There's resources there that we could possibly tap into that we just haven't been really accessing. We're going to help Florence. We're going to be her staff to do that. And thirdly, there's a need for unhoused population in Yellow Springs who are apt to go into a shelter to be able to store some stuff here in town, because they go into a shelter in Xenia overnight, but then they would come back. And we're working with the village and the township, initiated work with them to try to find space for some lockers that Florence would manage, and we would help with the installation and maintenance of those lockers. So that's, if there's money left over this year in the emergency fund, we would distribute that to, or open it up for distribution, probably through the existing emergency funds. Everybody hear me? I forgot to take my mask off, but so we would work probably through the existing emergency funds to be able to provide that money out to individuals. They work very well, dedicated group of people, and they really know what they're doing. Angie's going to talk a little bit more about the rest of it, YS Equity.
So our program, YS Equity, is going to be joining a national movement of universal basic income pilots. There's been a clear increase in these types of programs during COVID. So this means other communities are seeing what we're seeing, is that people in need who are struggling month to month are disproportionately impacted by COVID. This program will be the second UBI program in Ohio. It could potentially be the first local government supported program in Ohio. And what we see is that it would be the first documented UBI program in a village. This is really exciting because the only program that's comparable to our size is in Hudson, New York. It's a population of 5,800. We're in touch with them. There are fairy godparent leading us as we develop our program, and it's really incredible. They say you can see the impacts right away in a small community, which is very different when you're implementing UBI in a city of 300,000. Mayor Pam has already joined forces with us. She has already joined the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income Coalition. That organization is fantastic. There's a lot of resources, knowledge, and learning. There's the beautiful quote from Mayor Pam. And so we are developing a 3-year plan that accounts for growth, 3 cohorts, each growing 1 year after the other in terms of the numbers of families that are served in this program. Because it is being developed as an endowment, we've taken sustainability in mind from the beginning. So our goal is to grow it to an amount where we could support the program in perpetuity for 30 families at all times. What we're talking about is this first year of YS Equity. We already have secured the funding to support 10 families receiving $300 a month for 12 months. They will be selected through a weighted lottery. What that means is that to enter the lottery, you just need to earn below federal poverty guideline designated amount. In addition to that, it's a weighted lottery, which means we'll account for increased participation of individuals who are disproportionately underrepresented in terms of income and privilege. So that takes into account gender, race, ethnicity, disability status, single parenthood. So we know through various social indicators that those are people who can benefit significantly from the $300 a month. What we also know from 2019 census data is that there are 330 households in Yellow Springs that fall below the poverty line. So our program would be making a significant impact. That is approximately 10% of those in need receiving support through YS Equity. So this is really a unique and exciting opportunity to live out our values and address affordability as a community. We believe that the UBI guaranteed income model is a proven successful avenue to work together as a community to promote and protect diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is essential and critical to our identity as a village. Len is just going to quickly run through some of the data that we know from other communities that proves that this is an effective model.
I'll be very brief. We've collected results from 2 other demonstrations, one in Stockton, California. The Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration Model started in 2019 in 1 year, and this was a controlled experiment. They had a control group and participants. So comparing those results, in 1 year, they saw a 50% decrease in income volatility for participants, 100% increase in their ability to cover unexpected expenses with cash or cash equivalents, and a 20% increase in debt payments. In Hudson, started in 2020, in 1 year, they've had, their data collection process was a little different, but they also saw increased financial stability among their participants, increased employment, increased physical and mental health, improved family relationships, and increased agency of the participants in their lives. These are the kind of results we expect to see in Yellow Springs. The endowment will cover all the operational costs and the payments to participants. We have submitted a grant request to the county through their nonprofit ARPA Act grant process to help out with the startup costs And the one thing we ask of council is the potential that maybe you would write a letter to the county commissioners in support of this program. I think it'll be a stretch for the county to get behind this, but you never know. Angie, did you have any closing comments? Any questions we can answer? Or?
All right, thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Angie. You know, I just want to say, and I noticed a reference to our commitment to creating a village affordability plan. And, you know, when we met to talk about this a couple months ago, yeah, it just really inspired me. I know that Gavin's been in the mix as well. And yeah, questions from council members? Yeah.
Well, the information in the packet was very well put together. Appreciate you guys coming out. Yeah, I don't know that it'll be a stretch for Greene County to get behind it, but I also don't think we have any issue offering a letter of support. I'm just one person, but yeah, thank you for coming. And again, I like, because I've been hearing little bits and pieces about the program over the last few weeks, but it's been good to see everything all put together the way you've presented it.
Yeah, and nice that you guys are working with Florence. I think the lockers idea is amazing. Anything else? Yep.
Sure. Hey, thank you. Yeah, I think it's important folks kind of think about this in a bigger context. And I was part of some of the community conversations that sort of led to the basic income pilot. I think it's worth, you know, other folks understanding some of that. You know, we have a lot of wealth in our community. We have a lot of people that are doing well and doing fine and can cover their costs and more. And then we have some people in our community that are struggling. And frankly, and this is not on behalf of what y'all or on council, just my own personal comments. Capitalism is set up that way. It's going to be that way. And yet I think one of the really cool things about being in such a small community is that I think we can actually do something about it here. One of the interesting things about being in such a small village is that, for instance, if we took seriously ending poverty in the village, for example, we could do that. The scale of that effort in a larger community, I think, still can be done, but requires a significantly larger amount of will to the point where it would be extremely difficult. But here, I mean, we run the numbers. We know exactly how many people have how much income, and we know that the resources exist here to address these issues. So one of the most notable things that came up, you know, in our conversations that led to this was, you know, conversations around the school levy. And we're going to get into some of this stuff later as we talk about revenue and whatnot. But I think there was a, you know, legitimate and, you know, complex conversation about essentially, you know, at what point is the sort of straw that broke the camel's back as it relates to affordability in this village. And there was I think a concern that, hey, this is it, that the school levy is going to be too much. It's going to make it so that we're going to push people out of the community. I think regardless of what you think about the school levy, this larger issue of how do we deal with affordability? And somebody who's worked on state tax policy for years, follows federal policy. Functionally, our system has been making it so that the wealthier you are, the wealthier you're getting, the less income you have, the harder it is to get by. And we're not immune from that here in Yellow Springs. So that the idea of figuring out how do we set up vehicles that purposefully work to give opportunities for villagers with means and also generous contributors who are not here in the village now, or maybe partners, either institutional or individual, could contribute to actually directly offsetting essentially what I would call, like, we're talking about the impacts of climate change. Well, this is the impacts of the economic disaster that's been put on us by large corporations and the very wealthy systematically for decades. So just to say, this is a very concrete proposal to put money into people's pockets, and then gasp, when people have more money, they report more economic security. So that we can do things, I think, like build schools or fix up schools in Yellow Springs. We can do things that cost money. We do need to figure out how to, you know, make vehicles like this available, simply because, frankly, the state has taken away our ability to do things like progressive taxation through other forms of income. So I would love it if we could pass something that made it so the richest people in our community paid more and everybody else paid the same. We're not legally allowed to do that. But this thing, you could send your money to, and we'll make sure in this case, I am speaking as somebody who's been involved with this, we'll make sure that it gets to people who legitimately need it the most. Okay, sorry for the long speech, but I think this is really important, people, and a really big thing. So there you go, that's what I'm talking about.
Amen. Yeah, thank you, Gavin. Okay, so the request for a support letter, is everyone in support of that? Okay, and when do you need it by?
Sometime in the next 60 days.
Okay.
60. As soon as possible.
Okay.
Or 60 days.
Okay, so,
Whichever comes first.
well, so we,
Awards in the third quarter.
okay. Are folks comfortable with Gavin and I working on this? And sure. Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you both. All right, very exciting.
Right, can I clarify?
Yes.
Comfortable with you and Gavin working on a letter that will come back to council, or did you want to have it produced and out for the next council meeting, in which case council could vote to empower you and Gavin to write a letter on their behalf?
Yeah, I think I meant on council's behalf. So should we do a motion on that, or?
I would.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that Gavin and I write a letter on council's behalf to Greene County in support.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, that actually is a good segue into our first old business item. And I just want to say a few things, and then I'd like Gavin to elaborate a little bit, and then we're going to get into some nitty gritty from Josue. So one of the things that the Finance Committee is talking about is the affordability / mitigating the incredibly rising cost of living. This is a priority for council and for the village, and has been. And one of the things we started talking about, and Gavin actually mentioned this offline, is that I believe that the village needs more income tax, more property tax, more utility users if we are going to maintain the same level of services. This is the case that the village team has made. It makes sense to me, but there is this option of not having as many services, right? And that's something that I think is going to be part of this ongoing conversation that we've alluded to and are going to dig a little bit deeper in tonight. The second thing I want to highlight is that infill, which is something that we love as a village, has become very challenging because of our, basically our infrastructure that was not well taken care of in the past. And we've done some great work over the years. Johnny's been a lead in this, and so have finance directors and village managers to build capital funds to work on infrastructure, to go after grants, and we've been really successful in that regard. And but there are challenges right now with infrastructure that would limit residential or business development in a lot of places. But we're working on that. So I wanted to pass it over to Gavin you alluded to the schools, and I think it's good to talk about this larger picture around affordability for the village.
Okay.
Frame it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of big moving parts. I mean, one of the things that I feel like I've experienced in my short time here is that there's not a lot of money, and there's a lot of things that people want to do. And so we have some tough choices to make about where we put our resources. And I think one of the core questions that we're trying to figure out is how do we maintain economic diversity here? I don't know if this is what you wanted me to say or if I'm saying this right, but frankly, we could figure out how to make this village a better place in lots of different ways, but they would almost all include making the village more expensive. So if we are not doing things to actively offset the cost of living here, if we're not strategically working on addressing affordability, and I would say, frankly, we largely are not currently, it will get more expensive to live here, period. So that, major decisions, some that have been referenced in the meeting earlier about things like developing a green belt around the village, fantastic, development in many ways, and put a squeeze on housing and makes it so that it is costs continue to rise. There's a lot of great reasons to live here. I think it's why we all do. The quality of life here is really high, and there are more and more people who want to come here. And so unless we have additional housing, we're going to figure out how the costs are going to continue to go up. So there are many, many other dynamics that I should probably be bringing up. I didn't prepare anything. Sorry if I was supposed to. But it's a complex set of dynamics that we're trying to work through. And one of the things that pops up is, well, there's things that people want us to do, including multiple, requests here tonight. In every meeting, pretty much, people come and ask for things. Well, we could do all those things, but in order to do all those things, we have to figure out how to have revenue. Then we also have things like climate change that are happening that are making it so that storms are dealt with in ways that they weren't in the past. So we're trying to figure out and have a conversation about how do we approach this as a community, and it's interwoven with the discussions happening at MTFR about the levies over there, and it's interwoven with the schools, so that we know, as I think we all know, that if we do something right now, it will impact what happens with the schools and what happens with MTFR, and vice versa across the board for all of particularly the taxing entities. So I don't know, are those the kinds of things you wanted teed up?
Yeah, I think that those were the things that you highlighted at the Finance Committee meeting, and I think because you really brought those to the committee's attention, I wanted you to articulate it. And it's a good transition into what Josue is going to talk about, because as we look at some of these considerations around taxation and utilities and whatnot, I think council as a whole wants to be clear that we are sensitive to the fact that the schools need money and the township needs money, and we're all challenged with the increase in cost of living and so forth. And so we want to start this discussion, and then we'll start to see where it goes. We also hope to have joint discussions with the school board and with the township trustees. So Josue.
I feel like you guys read my PowerPoint.
Well, we just took care of some of the fluffy stuff. Not really.
I think it's an excellent conversation, and we need to have more of them, because there is no one solution, and there is no perfect solution. Anything that we do, there's trade-offs. And so putting that, I appreciate the conversation. I want to put in perspective that we're not having this conversation just on what money we need. We're having a conversation of all the things that you said. And there are other things that go involved in that conversation. One of them is that we've hit the highest inflation point in over 40 years. Inflation on July 3rd was 9.1%. And that is affecting prices across the board. It's affecting wages, the worker shortage. Part of why the recession is why the economy is so hot now is that there are more jobs and demand for more services and products than the economy can put them out. So there's a high demand on everything, and that's what's leading that inflation. It's also causing challenges within the workforce. I had an employee resign today. They're getting paid almost $20 more. I can't compete with that. There's things that we can't compete with that where we are. So we've got high inflation. We've been very sensitive to the rising cost in the village and the cost burden on our residents. So we were intentional about holding or putting a moratorium or a pause on any rate increases. So we didn't have any rate increases in 2020, 2021, and in 2022. So we did that on purpose. Now we can't continue that much further, so we need to evaluate those needs and respond appropriately so that we are properly investing in our infrastructure and other services so that we don't continue the bad practices in the past. No new housing development. There's rising cost. You guys addressed it well. People want to live here. People want to live here. We have a lot of residents that think that you look at household size as a number, as a ratio, is reducing. So folks are living in their homes longer with fewer people than what historically has been in the village. And so that's a reality. Why is that? Well, I think part of it is because there isn't supply for folks to make a move out of their home. Also, folks are living longer. I think those are good things, but we also need to plan around them and have strategies to address them. And I want to stress that we are being proactive. We are reviewing all revenue streams while we're being sensitive to everyone else's need. Specifically, I'll talk about the fire and EMS. They have a levy in the upcoming election in November. That's for 3.5 mills. This is money that they need to pay for existing employees. They have that challenge. And so I think that I want to stress to council and our citizens that the village government is being sensitive and considerate of everyone else's needs. And so I do look forward to these continued conversations so we can find common ground and find ways to serve our residents best with the limited resources that we have. So what are those revenue opportunities? This is what we presented last year during our 22 budget discussions. There are many ways, many things that we can do or look at. They all ultimately lead towards higher costs for residents. One is adjusting the reciprocal tax. What is reciprocal tax? The council as a body in the past set legislation that allows residents that live in the village but work elsewhere to get credit 100% for the village income tax, which is 1.5%. So if you live in the village and you work in Columbus, Dayton, Xenia, you're paying that 2.5%. The village is giving residents a full 100% credit for that 1.5% that they would pay the village. And so that's the reciprocal tax. I have scenarios of what it could look like if we adjusted the reciprocal tax credit. Implementing stormwater management utility. We spend a lot of money on stormwater management. It is an unfunded activity. It is a real issue that our community is facing now and has always faced. It just happens that precipitation is getting worse and worse every year. Adjusting planning and zoning fees. I think this is a tangible one. Council was very proactive in addressing new construction fees, particularly around tap fees, because we were losing money. Here's another opportunity, planning and zoning fees. It's good to adjust them because we're charging fees that are lower than other municipalities for the same service. And folks that are building new construction and are looking to do development, they're coming from a space that they understand that these are real costs and they expect to cover those expenses or cover those costs. Other ways are considering street levy to fund road improvements, park levies to support pool and parks improvement. At some point, we'll need to revisit the sidewalks as we completely repair them and shift either that responsibility to the property owners or considering assessments or other taxes to ensure funding is available for continued maintenance and installation of new sidewalks. So these are the revenue opportunities. What does a scenario look like adjusting the reciprocal tax? This chart is from July 7th, I believe. So it's recent. This is the most recent model that the RITA, our taxing agency, put together for us. So if we were to adjust our reciprocal tax credit from 100% to 75%, that would yield $117,000. If we adjusted it down to 50%, it would yield $234,000, almost $235,000. If we adjusted it to 25%, it would generate $352,000. If we did completely away with the reciprocal tax credit, it will yield $469,728. So, and this is all just on individual income taxes. So this is a scenario. I think I stayed within my 3 minutes for the piece.
Excellent. And there's a lot of information in the packet that highlights what surrounding municipalities do. Many of them have shifted to no longer giving a credit so that they guarantee their communities getting that income tax. Okay, so Any other thoughts? I mean, we don't want to, again, wanted to start the conversation, but we're not going to talk about it all night. Marianne?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to acknowledge Henry Myers, who was talking about this probably a decade or so ago, and people were sort of laughing at that point. It was not being taken seriously. Well, now we are, so thank you, Henry. The other thing that I want to mention that has been mentioned is that this is income tax. Retired people generally do not pay income tax. They pay property tax. Most of the property tax does not go to the village. There has been discussion, well, Tony Bent asked me to come over when, this was, well, it was a while ago, saying, I would love to I would love to pay money to the village government. I don't owe it. But if there were some system where people with money who are retired could sort of, it's like, okay, if you were actually working, this is how much money you would be paying, something like that. Whether the community foundation would be helpful, I don't know. But I think, as has been said tonight, there is wealth in this community. And there are people who are happy to provide that wealth, and especially I think if there's a vehicle for them to do that. So I think that could be another possibility for increasing village income.
All right, thanks, Marianne. Carmen, did you want to say something? Okay, Kevin?
No, since we don't want to get too far into the weeds, I will withhold comments.
Okay. I will say we looked at some of the things that were proposed as far as revenue streams. I'm going to say there's a more expansive list that includes potentially revisiting things like paid parking and other revenue streams. I know whenever we talk about parking, I'm putting my hand on the third rail, but I think we need to be creative, we need to be thoughtful, and again, we're hoping to have a conversation with other taxing entities as well. So, okay, Gavin, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that we can look at services. So there's, we can keep providing more things and, bringing in more revenue. We can also look at what our costs are and figure out other things we don't want to do. So while we're not going to go into this in depth here, I guess one of the things I'm hoping is that we are going into depth on it at some point in the future. One of the hardest things about being in this is that we end up having these 5 or 10 minute conversations about really complex issues. And this is one of the big ones. So I think later in this meeting and several, in subsequent meetings, we're going to be talking about sort of how to roll out the budgeting process. I hope that villagers will take seriously getting engaged in and making thoughts known about how we think about budgeting, and that we are going to be participating in conversations, already are to some degree, and I hope more formally with the other key stakeholder taxing entities and whatnot, where I hope there's going to be a robust conversation, because we do have some collective needs and we need to have some collective priorities. And so just to be clear, if we could just sort of unilaterally do some of these things or pass some of these things, I think that would be a disservice to the other entities that are trying to figure things out. But there is a sort of reciprocal nature to that. We need the other entities to also participate in that conversation. Frankly, I think that didn't happen for a long time in this village. We moved forward with not making utility increases and then making them. We move forward with a water treatment plant. We move forward with, a fire levy. We move forward with a series of things, and then we kind of got to a point where, and that was happening simultaneously to these major economic changes happening and tax changes happening, that then led us to now feeling like we have this larger issue. So just to say, we have some tough things to figure out here if we want to maintain some control, I guess you'd say. We can continue doing relatively nothing and then address things later. It will have serious implications because, frankly, if you can't afford to pay for the fixes that'll come, then you're going to get priced out. I don't know how else to say it.
All right. Thank you, Gavin. And one of these issues is going to be discussed under new business that was mentioned before. John, go ahead, come up.
Yeah, just in the line of thinking about possibly cutting services, I was wondering if you were possibly looking at moving to county dispatch, since we then, in theory, could still get the same services possibly at a cheaper price. Just wondering.
We haven't talked about it yet.
I want to throw that out there.
Okay, thanks. All right. So I realized that I skipped the manager's report. So I'm surprised nobody shouted out. So we're going to go back to the manager's report, and then we'll hop back to old business. Sorry about that, Jose.
No worries, no worries. All right, so my manager's report is in there, and I have business that requires urgent attention. So I'll need action from council tonight, specifically to memorialize an action that we need to take. So if you recall, back to March 21st of this year, council approved and accepted the settlement from OCRC related to the Hamby versus Yellow Springs case. Part of that settlement, there was no payout. We didn't incur the financial liability then, but part of the settlement does require that I, as the respondent, the village manager, attend anti-discrimination training as a result of this settlement. Now, I want to be clear that I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't here, but the village accepted responsibility, which I concur with the settlement on this piece, that there are things that should have been done and could have been done better. And so for that, I thought the settlement was appropriate, and I recommended the council to approve it. So we need to complete our training by August 24th. So I would need council to make a motion to memorialize that in the minutes, that you are authorizing the manager to enter into a purchase order for training on anti-discrimination law in Ohio, and that the manager will attend this training. Now, all of you are welcome to join me if you want to join me, but I need to memorialize that so that we can send that off to OCRC as proof that we discussed it. We're taking action towards it. I'll do the training. And then there's a second piece that we need to do by September, and that is to incorporate anti-discrimination language into the personnel policy manual. So I'm queuing that up now because I propose to bring language to the next meeting, which is the third Monday in August. We'll have language addressing that anti-discrimination piece. And we'll meet the timeline to be compliant on this piece, so. Okay. Any volunteers on that motion or questions?
I make a motion that we authorize a purchase order for the village manager to attend anti-discrimination training, and that the village manager attend that training. Is there anything else in that?
That's it.
That's it.
Is there a second?
I second that.
By a certain time?
I need to do it by August 24th.
By August 24th.
Okay.
And we seconded it.
We've got a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
So I have a question. Also, I think you wholeheartedly invited us
Yes.
to attend the training. Does the cost increase on a per person basis?
One of the things I'm looking to do for the training is set it up for whatever period of time OCRC requires that I complete the training. And I'm looking to hire Clemens for this piece. They do HR and legal services. For whatever period of time it is, that will be the training. And if it's just me, it will be just me. If it's several of you, then it'll be all of us. But I envision that it's more time-oriented training than versus a charge per person that attends.
Okay.
And I want to emphasize, definitely let us all know, and staff as well.
Yep.
Okay.
So, quickly, we're entering our second week of a high transmission rate. I shared previously that at the time when we went into high transmission rate, there were 3 counties in Ohio that were on red. Now I'm counting over 8 counties are in high transmission rate. COVID's only spreading more, so I anticipate that might continue. Our wastewater treatment test are showing no change. They're just having lateral changes. So we did have a spike a couple weeks ago, and that corresponds with what we saw the following, which was the county going into a high transmission rate. We remain a high transmission rate, but our viral load at the wastewater treatment facility is not spiking or significantly reducing. So last council meeting, I said, hey, we're downward trending, and it ended up that we weren't. So I would say now that we are probably upward trending, and maybe we'll go down. So
Well, I guess a good thing, and I was going to ask a question, but a good thing, if you will, is that regarding us meeting in person under higher transmission rates, I mean, the fact that we're not going to meet again for a month is sort of a positive in that regard.
Right.
I'm just wondering, you know, what do we need to listen out to in the meantime with regard to approaching the third Monday in August when we are about to meet, if things, or to what degree things might need to change for us to change our meeting stance?
That's an excellent question, and I don't know.
Right.
And I don't know because this new strand is spreading very rapidly with high symptoms, and I'm vaccinated, but seems that in other communities, vaccinations are not having the same effect as we expected and I wanted them to. So I don't know. I think we continue to monitor. And I think council has the authorization. If we're still high transmission rate, we could have a virtual meeting if you would be interested in that. I don't know if that's where you're going with your question.
Yes, I'm sorry, it wasn't more clear. That is, and I understand it's a moving target.
Yeah.
And yes, we went up and back down, thought we were good, and now we're up again, and more of us are up. So I'm just anticipating how bad things could get, because the pandemic is really not over, regardless of how much we like to act like it is. So really just want to put it out there, just that things may change, and I hope we can be nimble and safe moving forward.
I have a broadband update. We discussed it briefly earlier. We are going to schedule that town hall for the municipal broadband. I'll give you some numbers of where we are now. We have over 80 folks registered for the pilot program, of which we've done 30 site assessments. Scott and myself, I've did the site visits with a couple of them with him. We've assessed 30 homes where the fiber drop is going to happen at the house and where the fiber is going to run from outside of the house into the interior of the house. So we've done 30. We've hit some delays with all the fiber installers being double booked on all these fiber projects, and with municipalities that are larger than us and paying them a lot more money. So we just don't rise to that level. And many of these projects, just to be clear, many of these projects were in the pipeline prior to ours. You know, you've heard about Cincinnati Bell, who is now Alta Fiber, that's building fiber in the entire county. That's millions of dollars of work happening. So we've had some challenges securing our installers. We're working on it. I hate to say that we're still working on it, but we are, and we'll continue to push for them, and we hope that we can get these folks hooked in before August. Sorry, in August, no later than September.
Right.
So on the Lawson Place apartments, we have stopped accepting applications. We have more than enough applications to consider. 4 units are leased. So we just got that one unit that we're waiting to close out on all the income verifications and have it leased up. So we're hitting that target date that we will be fully leased by July. So we acquired the property in January, had a lot of repairs to do, and within 6 months of those repairs, or initiating those repairs, we are going to be a fully occupied apartment building. So cool. On the staffing, I've extended the search for finance director position. You know, this position was initially budgeted for $75,000. I'm not getting enough applicants for that amount. The comps for the position are higher, so I've had to raise it to $85,000. I've got a small pool now. I wait until Friday of this week to continue the screening process. I hope to have enough candidates to move forward with the screening and start interviews. It is a tough labor market to try to hire. But we'll keep at it. We'll keep at it. Today, I had some additional help come in from Robert Half. I hired a administrative and finance assistant person to help with some record keeping and data entry, and also to prepare us for our annual audit, which is scheduled for August 8th. So August 8th, I will have the audit team on site to conduct our annual audit. So we're continuing. We're on the timeline, if you will. We'll get it done prior to the third quarter of completing the third quarter of the year. So we're meeting those targets. Any questions? There's a lot in my actually, I have one more, and it's important because social media is maybe blowing up a little bit on this. We started the work on the parking lot and trailhead of the cemetery lot. This is parking lot and trailhead for the future Yellow Springs Clifton connector. This is a project the council approved in 2021, set money aside. We pursued grant money from the state, and we got $20,000 from the Wine State Capital Appropriations budget. So we started cutting the beautiful honeysuckle that's out there and some ash trees that were bad. So you may hear about that, but we started that work, and we hope to have it completed sometime in the summer, certainly ahead of the street fair.
Okay. All right. Any questions? All right, in unison. Okay, so we're going to move back to old business, and Carmen is going to give us an update on the Citizen Review Board.
Sure. So I think there's a memo included in the packet. Basically, it's just kind of a brief recent history of the CRB proposal. So formally proposed to council in June 2021, and then prior to 2021, there were at least two initiatives by citizens and council to include some type of citizen-involved review of allegations of police misconduct in the village. So when I got on council, this was kind of a thing that Lisa and a couple other, council members had been working on. And then, like when I came on board, it became kind of a Lisa and my thing. Since Lisa has, resigned from council, there hasn't been a lot of movement on it because the attorney that I found was busy for months, but finally, also included in the packet, I don't know if you guys, I sent an email earlier for council members with Attorney John Waddy's kind of dossier, his qualifications, his experience, resume is in there, his curriculum vitae, I think, is in there also. These are documents that village manager and a couple other council members requested. So now we have everything in place, at least as far as what council and village manager were asking for regarding Mr. Waddy. So let's see here. The main issue, I think, was finding someone who could review the proposal as it is now, the most recent proposal, and the draft legislation that Laura Curliss worked on, to review it, to make sure that that it satisfies what the Citizens Committee and 365 Project individuals help us make a nation, and and other people, so that it satisfies what kind of we want and also follows the law and can be written into legislation that council can approved so that we can finally have a citizens review board. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the CRB, what it is.
I think it sounds like, so to that last point about the review, the legal review, and we wanted to make sure, pass the ORC, the charter, and that sort of thing. I know that our village solicitor raised, I think, something about the charter. Josue, you've raised something as well, so we've got a few.
Yes, most of it has been around, one is what are the legal ramifications of certain elements of the proposal? Does the current legal framework, does the ORC allow it? What does it mean from an operational perspective? What changes need to be made? So I think those things will come out of the conversation or out of the assessment that if Wadi, the Lord Wadi is selected, would flush out some of those things. So thank you, Carmen, for the documents and putting together. On our end, we've been ready to initiate what is the next step. So if council's ready, I can come back with some negotiated points between us and Wadi and Carmen if you want to be involved. And I don't know what else.
Yeah, I think that's, I feel like that's the next step. Because, we need to make sure, we do have a slightly different council, but we generally approved moving forward with the legal review. And I did get a chance to briefly look at some of the documents. Wadi
We need a motion.
Yeah.
Well, so to that end, I'd like to make a motion that we hire Mr. Wadi to review the proposal and the draft legislation as it is, to work with the Citizens Committee, 365 project, and of course us, to ensure if there are any changes that need to be made, if there are, if there's anything that needs to be done to the documents as they are, that we do that in a way that is in the best interest of everyone, and of course the community at large and people that are mostly affected by potential misconduct.
So if I could just perhaps curtail the motion, I got the sentiment, but if maybe does it capture it to say you're motioning to hire Attorney Wadi to review the CRB as it is currently written?
Yes.
May I have some clarifying questions? So I have, for I think on our end, we will need to have a contract. Contract will need to have the contract amount.
Right.
And then a defined scope of work.
Right.
So is it directing Josue to work on that and bring it back to us?
Because, we already, so I guess what, I don't know, it was in April, we already set aside the amount of $5,000. So what I'm just making a motion that we vote to hire him for that. And so whatever happens after that, whatever village manager has to do, I think that we should, I'm gonna leave that to village manager. But what I would like to see happen today is that we hire him specifically to review the draft legislation. And the proposal as it's written.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
And I'm kind of interpreting what you've said. It's you're moving to authorize the village manager to contract with Attorney Wadi to review the CRB as written.
Yes.
Okay. Did you have another question, Josue?
No, I'm processing what are the things I need to do. I would need to have a conversation with Attorney Wadi. Is 5,000 to get firm commitment that 5,000 includes the revision review of the proposal as written, and ensuring that it meets or ensuring that it meets compliance with ORC, village PPM, village charter, and all these things. I want to be clear about
Of course, and I think that that's been expressed, at least at a couple of council meetings, of course.
Any other questions or discussion?
Well, I'm just trying to, wonder what Josue needs to move forward, because I just started reading the email because I just didn't get a chance earlier. But Josue, you mentioned a statement of work, which certainly would be appropriate when we're committing dollars.
Correct.
So I haven't seen that in this. Again, I just started reading it a little while ago.
Okay, so we said that once that's all put together, it can be shared with all of council. So we'll make sure that happens. So, it sounds like there's a negotiation, there's shoring up that scope of work in a document, and then that can be shared with council.
So are you saying then that this will come back, that the contract would come back to council for us to vote on the contract, or we'd see it, or
I think it depends on how, let's see how long it takes. So, okay.
Okay. John's there, and then I guess.
Well, I think we're not taking any comments. We're just figuring out the next step. So, okay.
So this is what I can do. Certainly, I can engage in the negotiation process. I think that there are two elements to that contract arrangement. One is the actual contract that outlines the terms and the agreement, and then there's the scope of work, specifically what is it going to, what is the expectation of the deliverable from WADI. So I will circulate both documents with council to make sure that I am meeting your expectations in terms of a contractual arrangement and the scope of work. Because one of the issues that came out of with the review of Larry James, that regardless of how thorough it was, it did not meet the expectations of some council members. There were folks that were expecting to see certain information, and his review didn't cover that. So I want to make sure that whatever gets produced this time around is hitting the marks or the expectations of all of council members. Does that sound fair? That I will circulate a contract, what the terms would be, and then a scope of work, what would be the specific questions that he would need to answer with regards to the proposal.
And I think it wouldn't hurt for that all to be settled and then for council to see it at the next meeting. But, if we can do all that, outside of council meeting legitimately, then.
But it's my understanding that after we get all that, then we would make a decision about hiring or executing the contract, which doesn't exist.
Right.
Well, I'm interpreting this motion as you are authorizing the village manager to negotiate that scope of work and contract. And when he is simply saying, I'm going to show that to you to make sure that what I am negotiating is in fact what you want. I did not hear the question as to whether he was being hired or not, but simply that you are all clear as to the terms of the contract for the hire that you are now moving to approve. That's the motion on the table, as I understand it. Carmen, am I correct in that?
So I'm moving to hire Attorney Waddy to review the proposal. And then what village manager has to do and circulate among us is what village manager has to do and circulate among us. But I'm moving that we hire him.
Okay. Gavin, go ahead.
I hope I'm not making this more difficult, but isn't it similar to what we were doing with the solicitor, where it's like we're basically saying, hey, we're giving you the authority to do this. You're saying you're going to communicate with us about how you're doing it, because there have been some things we wanted input on, but we don't need to come back.
Well, I mean, one difference is we don't have legislation on the table to approve that. So the pause I have is just making sure that it's all transparent, and then if citizens do want to comment, that they can do that at that time.
Well, it's the draft legislation as it is now, because Laura did have something, and it should be included in the packet, and also the proposal for the CRB itself.
So if I may, Gavin, you made a good point about the process. What council authorized me to do with regards to the solicitor contract is to negotiate that contract, and then that contract comes back to council for approval. I don't have authorization to execute that contract, only to negotiate it. Then I bring it back to council. And then council has a public hearing on it and votes on it. And if that moves forward and is voted in, I can then execute that contract and start spending money on that contract. So there's I don't know if that's where you two were heading, but that would typically be the process. And that's even with the MOU, the MOU is explicit that these things, here's the draft, and the village manager will now negotiate or review this and make adjustments, and we'll have the legal review to make sure that the MOU is proper.
So then would we be actually voting on directing Josue to negotiate the contract with
If,
Attorney Wadi?
if the motion is modified.
And that is,
Are you,
that is
do you want to modify the motion, Carmen?
I thought that was in the motion.
well, okay. So what I'm hearing is hire without a scope of work.
Details that need to be a part of it. But my motion is to hire Mr. Wadi to review proposal and the draft legislation.
Okay. And Marianne, do you still second that?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just going to say my decision is going to be based on, I think we need to follow the same process that we do with all other contracts. So Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah.
And are you saying you think that this is different than the other contracts?
Right, because normally the contract, like Josue explains, comes back to council after it's negotiated and then we vote on it. So I think that's the process that we need to follow. So that would mean it's negotiated, scope of work's all in there. It comes back on the 18th, or I'm sorry, on the 15th, and then we vote on it. So.
But we're voting on we'd be voting on the contract.
Which would be hiring.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. We can't, I don't want to say we hire him now, but don't know what he's going to do. I say, get the contract that says what he's going to do. We did that already. We thought we had it all together. We spent $5,000 or $6,000 and got nothing that we asked for.
Okay, well, I think we've discussed it in depth, so. Okay, so Judy, let's call roll on the, yeah.
No, I don't.
I mean, I think we all want the same thing.
I agree.
We want to get what we want to get, and we want Attorney Wadi to do it.
Yes.
So how the steps to do it is, I think, what's the confusion about. So I don't know that we want to vote on something when there's still.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, can I just, to clarify, what I'm hearing very clearly from everybody is we need to bring a resolution on the 15th that is approving a contract with Attorney Wadi to review the existing CRB proposal. That can be done. I can put that on the agenda and that can happen. You do not have to necessarily have a motion and a second to do that. It's okay for you to just request that resolution come.
Right.
And then Josue needs to do all of the work to make that happen by the 15th, which kind of eliminates all the fog of confusion. Because I do think you're all looking at the same light at the end of the tunnel. You're just kind of bumping into some walls on the way.
So this has been, sure.
No,
I mean,
No.
so what is it?
So it'll be on the agenda on the 15th and we'll vote on it. And it'll have the contract, the scope of work, the cost.
It's important for me that I'm just going to say it right now. I don't think that, for me, I'm not interested in having anyone else review it. I know that we work with other law firms, we work with other lawyers. I'm not interested in having anyone else that we hire to review the proposal, the draft legislation, and as it is, except for Attorney Waddy, just because of his experience with, citizens review boards and the like.
I will say I support all of that.
Yeah.
I just want us to follow the process.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I think we're all on the page of it having Attorney Waddy. Is that right? Kevin?
I will make a decision after seeing the contract. I mean, I have no problem with Waddy. I'm just saying, I don't want to say hire somebody now.
I'm not saying hire.
Okay.
It seems like if we're in agreement that we want
Absolutely.
Attorney Waddy to do it, we also want to make sure that we want him to do what we want him to do. And so this procedure that's being proposed that, John, I really would like you to sit down. It's very distracting, please. We're proposing that Josue work on this and he send it out so we can all see it and then it'll come back.
On the 15th?
Yep.
All right.
okay. All right. Well, thanks. And I am glad it's moving forward. I'll say that. I'm sorry that the discussion was confusing. Okay. So we're moving into new business and we're going to talk about the stormwater utility, which was mentioned in the prior section.
All right. I am sorry, folks. My computer crashed and it did an update, but I am up and running. I am up and yes, Windows.
Gotta love it.
Windows. All right. So in your packet, I included the stormwater study from 2020, and I also included the presentation that was conducted in 2020, actually October 5th of 2020, by Choice One, who was the company hired to do the stormwater assessment. If you get anything out of over 100 pages of stormwater information is that we have an inadequate stormwater system. We need to invest in our stormwater system. And that's the importance of having regulations and having a stormwater utility. I have the presentation here that was done by Choice One then, and this is a map of our system. There's a lot of gaps in the stormwater system. A lot of those gaps came about. There just wasn't a cohesive plan on how to have that infill development and capture water from the entire village. I think part of it was the adoption of the no growth policies that, hey, we're not growing, why invest in these things? So the recommendations then by Choice One was to.
Did you have a question, Gab?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
This thing, I'm just wondering, this thing about, you said this before, the no growth policy addressing, was that a conscious, meaning I've also heard concerns about, I think they were brought up in the retreat, I think, public at this point, essentially mismanagement, poor staffing related to these issues. I'm just trying to make sure I understand, to what degree is the situation we're in because things were mismanaged versus because we consciously did not do it?
I think mismanagement is a very loaded word because it implies that it was intentional, that like, hey, we're being negligent in the work. I think when the intention is not to exceed a certain number, like and a lot of this is anecdotal, Gavin. I'm also going based on what the elders in the community are saying. Hey, we did this thing and now we're paying for it. Well, there aren't a whole lot of great record keepings about these policies. There were some records I found, one from the League of Voter Women, a report in the 70s that Megan Bachman wrote a really extensive story about it. And that study referenced that there was an intentional act by the citizens to have no growth. And what that report also highlighted, what would be the consequences of having no growth. So we do have some things that speak to that policy or that intentionality of that. I think if I were to rephrase that word mismanagement, I think there was an intention to slow down any growth that would add more people to the village. And that had a ripple effect that was unintentional. Folks just said, hey, we want Greenbelt around us. They didn't think about the unintended consequences of either building a Greenbelt or doing away with the building department, because we also had our own building department that the village did away with. And so once you eliminate your building department, then you're putting the authority and the power of development in someone else's hand. I don't think folks thought through that process. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's important because we are trying to figure out as a village, are we growing? And if so, how?
And how much?
And how much? So I'm just saying, not choosing not to grow does not mean that you have to let your infrastructure languish. When I talk about mismanagement, I'm talking about, this was at the village retreat. I think it's public. The current public works director talking about in the past, we had staff who were playing crossword puzzles and bird watching, and there have been other comments about concerns around essentially major infrastructure projects not being prioritized, et cetera. So if that's not mismanagement, I don't know.
Deferred maintenance is a good way to put it too.
Okay.
Frankly, I bet you can't find any other community in the United States
It's as old as we are that haven't have the same problems. I mean, that was what was being done.
Yeah.
It wasn't being done.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of it is also by design. And as a country, we build communities, primarily suburban communities, without consideration for the long-term financial expense of serving these communities. So some of the flaws are by design in the system. I think a lot of it is an exercise, an experiment. A lot of housing development has been an experiment. And we figure out that some things work and some don't. And now we're working with information that folks in the 70s and 80s didn't have. So it's important that recognize where those folks were in those times and what their goals are. We have to honor that history, but we don't have to repeat the same mistakes. So I would say that some of it was, maybe folks were intentional not to invest it. I would say that was part of our problem with our water plant, that we knew these things have a certain life expectancy. They don't last forever. So you have to put capital into maintaining them, replacing them. And that's just something that we have to budget for. With the recommendations that we have with choice one, there were some stormwater regulations leveraging the village experience. That's primarily the experience. Sorry, that's twofold. That's the experience of the team, of our workforce, and the experience in the community, because I feel blessed that we have such expertise in our community to deal with some of these things at the local level on site. Don't drive by my house. My wife got a couple rain barrels that I failed to put up. But, we know what we need to do. I need to make the time to install them. And there's so many residents in town that are using their expertise in dealing with stormwater on the property. So that's part of the recommendation. How do we create those vehicles to address those issues? We saw it in the presentation earlier from Alex that one of the things that group is going to look at is how do you deal with water on site? So having water retention swells and other features. Stormwater utility implementation is one of those pieces. The public-private partnership, one of the examples I've seen, and it's included in this presentation, is this is an example of a public-private partnership. How do we leverage our relationships with private property to create some of these detention facilities? The DDC project, if you've not had a chance to see that site plan for that subdivision at the Kinney property, I would encourage you to see it. And there's a property detention pond featured in that area. We did a good job at negotiating upon water retention features at the Ober project. So those are examples of public-private partnerships that we can engage in. Yes, Marianne?
So I noticed that this is 10 minutes.
Yes.
And we could probably take several days digging deeply into
yes.
stormwater.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, is there a particular kernel that you want us to take from this time right now? And I'm assuming that we're going to be coming back.
Yes, we're definitely coming back. This is our purpose of the conversation is to introduce or follow up on this topic that we introduced in 2020, and that is the idea of the stormwater utility. How do we create one? How do we implement one? What are the advantages, disadvantages? So I think you know what the advantages are, is that it creates a revenue stream to finance stormwater projects. What is the disadvantages? Well, it's coming from, we have to take more taxpayer money. It's not coming from property taxes, but it's another fee that we're putting on our residents. So that's a disadvantage.
And are you guys still talking about $2 a month?
Yes, we were talking about we looked at some rates, and we spoke with John Courtney, Courtney Associates. He's doing our utility study. And there are so many ways of assessing fees. There's three primary examples. One is the flat fee, which is what you're referring to, Brian, setting a flat fee for residential and commercial. Another assessment tool is based on impermeable surface of the property, so rooftop, driveways, and whatnot. And the third way of assessing is based on water consumption at the property. You pay a proportional amount for every gallon of water that you consume as a water consumer. So there's three ways. We think that we should start with something simple and small, a flat fee. $3 for residential customers, $7 for commercial customers. It's not a very high fee, but it gets us going. And if then we want to develop the capacity to look at assessing fees based on impermeable surface area, then that's the next level in having a progressive implementation. After that, we can even look at offsetting those fees by establishing some sort of credit system. So if someone is taking care of X amount of water on their property, then they could request a waiver of the fee. So we can scale this project or adjust it in the future for something that fits our community. But the simple process to start will be a flat fee, $3 for residential customer, $7 for commercial customer. The next conversation I want to bring to the table, or the next topic or next information I will bring to council is, we'll bring charts with what are surrounding communities charging and how it has progressed in different communities. But the flat fee is something that I think everyone can wrap their head around.
So I think ultimately Josue's ask is whether council agrees to bring that we want something brought forward.
Yes.
Okay.
Indeed, yes.
I do as well.
Okay.
Gavin, do you want this brought back?
Yeah, I'd like to continue to talk about it. I think this question of we have 10 minutes and then at what point, because just so we're all on the same page, we could expand, benefits for employees, for health benefits to address, the impacts of Roe versus Wade. And we can figure out how to, address stormwater issues. At some point, you start doing all these things, you run out of money, and then you got to figure out how to put more fees or more revenues. I'd like to be able to talk about it holistically. So yes, I think it's good to see the numbers, and also have enough time to be able to talk about how all these things fit together.
Yeah. And definitely the purpose of this discussion is, do we want it to come back?
Yeah.
Carmen, how do you feel?
Yeah, absolutely want it to come back. And I think that it's, I think that this is something that we need to implement in the village and have needed to implement for a long time. And, three, it was two, now three to, $3 or $7, depending on whether you're residential or commercial. It's really kind of a nominal fee. It's not, I don't think it's going to break anybody's bank, but the revenue that could be generated from it over a period of time could be pretty significant. And I think that it'll be really, really helpful for the village to have those funds available.
And I do just want to clarify that while this discussion was 10 minutes, it has been discussed at least 4 prior meetings, and it was very clear during our retreat that we needed to deal with this as well.
Yeah.
Jessica?
Jessica Thomas, Yellow Springs News. I just want to know how a flat fee will affect businesses that are housed in residentially zoned places. For example, some of the shops that were apartments. How are those fees going to be assessed? How does this work for people who are a part of the cottage industry, who have a business running out of their homes? And why haven't we more aggressively looked at a progressive rate based on impermeable surfaces?
Mostly because this is the first time we said move it forward on the last question, but otherwise you've got,
Yes.
you can add that to the next.
Oh, yes, I can add that question and,
Great.
and I'll connect with you offline as well.
Okay. All right, we've got one more new business item. Can we get that schedule up there real quick? This should take less than a minute. Okay, so we've all been contacted about a budget schedule with the idea of moving things up. And the purpose behind starting out with looking at 2023 goals is to really bring that into the conversation with staff recommendations so that ultimately all of that is looked at in the budget. And so that when we make decisions, we are thinking about, what Gavin was saying in the last conversation around what we're doing and what we're not doing, sort of thing. So I think everyone's got the schedule. I know that Josue is planning a town hall to talk about the budget. Remember, all the budget sessions are public meetings as well. And hopefully we will not need the 3rd public meeting. So yeah, at this point, it's too late to bring it up. All right, I'm done. Okay, yeah, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so any questions before we wrap things up? Okay, so board and commission reports were in writing in the packet. Future agenda items. So we've got the contract for Wadi. Anything else?
Do you want stormwater? Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, you got an ordinance for the stormwater utility. I've got ordinance amending the personnel policy manual to incorporate the anti-discrimination language.
We'll have the contract for Amy coming back.
Correct. Yes, and then the letter of support, we'll just put it in the packet so that folks see what you've written in support of the Angie request.
Anything else?
We'll have the OCRC manual in September.
Okay.
PPM.
Great.
Oh, wait, not till September?
I could bring it back in August if we have time. I'm seeing 5 agenda items on there.
Are these other things that are on today's agenda suggested?
Yep.
All right, great. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, I want to wait 5 minutes because I told Dad.
No.
I move.
Is there a second?
I move. Oh, somebody moves.
I did,
second.
yeah.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Have a great vacation, Judy.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
27.